Hello friends, and welcome. Today I'd like to provide an overview of one of America's great cities, Indianapolis. We will also take a dive into the area's rich history. Indianapolis is the capital and most populous city in the U.S. state of Indiana, and is the seat of Marion County. It is located at roughly the center point of the state of Indiana in the Till Plain region along the West Fork of the White River. Indianapolis is the largest city in the United States not on a navigable body of water. Early on in the city's history, the White River on which the city sits was found to be too shallow for use in trade by steamboats. The name Indianapolis was created from a combination of the words Indiana, which means land of the Indians, and the Greek suffix polis, meaning city. Translated literally, Indianapolis means the city of the land of the Indians. Nicknames for the city include the 317, Circle City, the Crossroads of America, Naptown, and Indy. Some famous individuals from Indianapolis include actor Brendan Fraser, TV host and comedian David Letterman, notorious criminal and bank robber John Dillinger, comedian and actor Mike Epps, TV news anchor Jane Pauley, singer Adam Lambert, legendary actor Steve McQueen, singer and songwriter Babyface, and author Kurt Vonnegut. Indy is currently the 16th most populous city in the United States, the third most populous city in the Midwest after Chicago and Columbus, and the fourth most populous state capital after Phoenix, Austin, and Columbus. As of the 2020 census, Indianapolis had a city population of 887,642, ranking it 16th in the country, a metro population of 2,089,653, good for 34th in the nation, and a combined statistical area population of 2,599,860, making it the 27th largest in the United States. Indianapolis is a planned city. The streets of the city are laid out in a grid pattern, centered on a large traffic circle called Monument Circle. 4 large diagonal avenues radiate outwards from Monument Circle, the 4 avenues being Indiana Avenue, Kentucky Avenue, Massachusetts Avenue, and Virginia Avenue. The city is home to the largest collection of monuments dedicated to veterans and war casualties in the United States outside of Washington, D.C. Most of these monuments, as well as many of the city's government buildings and churches, are made from Indiana limestone, which was quarried in an area between Bloomington and Bedford, Indiana, only 35 miles southwest of the city. Indiana limestone is often considered to be the best quarried limestone in the world, which is hard to argue against as 35 out of 50 state capitals are built from this material, as well as Yankee Stadium, the Empire State Building, the Pentagon, the Biltmore Estate, and the U.S. National Cathedral. Indianapolis hosts the 29th largest economy in the United States, with a GDP exceeding $184 billion in 2022. Well-known industries in the area include pharmaceuticals, motor vehicle parts, medical equipment, and aircraft products. 3 Fortune 500 companies call the area home, including pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly, insurance company Elevance Health, and agrochemical company Corteva. Other famous companies based in the city include Finish Line, Allison Transmission, Lids, Lucas Oil Products, and Steak 'n Shake. The city is also an important transportation and logistics hub. The city is home to 2 four-year public universities, Indiana University, Indianapolis, and Purdue University, Indianapolis, and 2 secular private universities, Butler University and Martin University. Indiana University, Indianapolis has an enrollment of over 25,000 students and hosts the main campus of the IU School of Medicine, the largest medical school by enrollment in the United States. Several famous authors have called Indianapolis home, including Booth Tarkington, Meredith Nicholson, and James Whitcomb Riley, author of Little Orphan Annie and The Raggedy Man. Perhaps Indy's most well-known author, Kurt Vonnegut, who created Slaughterhouse-5 and The Sirens of Titan, came from a long line of German Americans who settled in Indianapolis in the mid-1800s. More recently, Indianapolis author John Green wrote The Fault in Our Stars, which became one of the best-selling books of all time. The area has grown to become the cultural center for a large swath of the Midwest. Indy is home to the Indiana State Fair, the Indianapolis Museum of Art, the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, the Idle Jorg Museum of American Indians and Western Art, and the largest children's museum in the entire world. As the state capital, the city hosts many state government buildings, including the Indiana State House. The city maintains 212 parks, totaling 11,258 acres, or 5% of the city's total land area. The largest and most visited park, Eagle Creek Park, is one of the largest municipal parks in the U.S. Some distinctive local cuisine favorites that were invented or popularized in Indianapolis include pork tenderloin sandwiches, a breaded and fried pork cutlet served on a bun, sugar cream pie, a type of custard pie made of cream, sugar, and cornstarch, and the beef Manhattan, an open-faced sandwich consisting of roast beef and gravy with mashed potatoes on top. The city is also the birthplace of Wonder Bread. Indy hosts many major annual conventions, including the Fire Department Instructors Conference, the National Future Farmers of America Conference, an organization for agricultural education for middle and high schoolers, Gen Con, the largest tabletop game convention in North America, and the Performance Racing Industry Trade Show, the world's largest racing trade show. Indianapolis is a sports town, and many consider it to be the de facto sports capital of the United States. The city is the home of 3 major league sports teams: the NFL's Indianapolis Colts, the NBA's Indiana Pacers, and the WNBA's Indiana Fever. The Colts, led by Hall of Fame coach Tony Dungy and Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning, won Super Bowl 41 in 2007. And the Fever won the WNBA Finals in 2012 with a 3-1 series victory over the Minnesota Lynx. The headquarters of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, or NCAA, is located in Indy. Additionally, the city is home to 2 NCAA athletic conferences, Division I's Horizon League and Division II's Great Lakes Valley Conference. The city also hosts the National Federation of State High School Associations and 3 national sports governing bodies: USA Football, USA Gymnastics, and USA Track and Field. Indianapolis hosted the 1982 U.S. Olympic Festival and 1987 Pan American Games. Butler University's Hinkle Fieldhouse, also known as Indiana's Basketball Cathedral, was the largest basketball arena in the world from 1928 to 1950 and hosted the Indiana High School Boys Basketball Championship for many years, and is considered the birthplace of Hoosier Hysteria, the state of perpetual excitement in Indiana surrounding high school basketball. The NFL Scouting Combine has been hosted by the city since 1987, and in 2008, Super Bowl 46 was played at Lucas Oil Stadium. Indianapolis has hosted the Big Ten Football Championship games since 2011, and the city also often hosts the men's and women's Final Four basketball tournament games. And of course, Indy is synonymous with auto racing and is a global center for motorsports. The area is home to 2 auto racing sanctioning bodies, IndyCar and the United States Auto Club, and hosts more than 500 motorsports-related companies. Perhaps most notably, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a National Historic Landmark, and the world's largest sports venue with over 235,000 permanent seats, is located in the area and has hosted the Indianapolis 500 since 1911. Winning the Indy 500 is considered one of the 3 achievements towards winning the Triple Crown of motorsports, the other 2 achievements being to win Le Mans and to win Formula One's World Drivers' Championship. The track also hosts IndyCar's Grand Prix of Indianapolis and NASCAR's Brickyard 400 and Pennzoil 250. Because of its central location in the state in the Midwest, Indianapolis is serviced by 4 major interstate highways: I-65, which connects to Louisville and Chicago, I-69, which connects to Fort Wayne, Bloomington, and Evansville, I-70, which connects to St. Louis, Dayton, and Columbus, and I-74, which connects to Peoria and Cincinnati. 2 auxiliary interstate highways also serve the city. The I-465 beltway surrounds the entire city, and the I-865 serves as a short connector between I-65 and I-465. But even with all of these major highways, the city's urban sprawl and the absence of a comprehensive regional public transit system have contributed to Indianapolis residents driving more vehicle miles per capita than any other city in the United States. The Indianapolis International Airport is located a few miles southwest of downtown and is only the 43rd busiest airport in the United States by passenger travel but is one of the 10 busiest cargo airports in the United States and serves as FedEx's second largest air cargo hub. Lastly, the Amtrak Cardinal Line, which runs between New York City and Chicago, passes through Indianapolis and provides passenger rail travel to the area. The nearby Beech Grove Shops Railway Maintenance Facility, which opened in 1908, serves as Amtrak's primary maintenance facility in the United States and contains a very large freight yard. So how did Indianapolis become the cultural and economic heart of the region and grow to become one of the largest cities in the United States? Let's take a dive into Indy's history to find out. But before we dive into the history of Indianapolis, a quick reminder that if you enjoy the content we create, please like or comment on the video or subscribe to our channel. It is absolutely free to do so and takes just a couple seconds to carry out. Doing so really helps the channel out and we greatly appreciate it. Indianapolis is located only about 14 miles southeast of the state of Indiana's geographic center. The city is located on the east bank of the White River, which eventually flows into the Ohio River via the Wabash River. It is centrally located less than 200 miles distance from the modern-day large metro areas of Cincinnati, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Louisville, Kentucky, and Chicago, Illinois. The region where Indy sits today was subject to the erosive advance and retreat of the Laurentide ice sheet between 2.6 million and 11,700 years ago, which produced a flat to gently rolling landscape. The area experiences 4 distinct seasons with hot and humid summers and cold and snowy winters. Before the city existed, the area was home to Native Americans, including the Lenape Delaware peoples who lived along the White River. Densely wooded lands and easy access to water provided great hunting and fishing areas. However, there were no permanent indigenous settlements in the area, only temporary ones. Following the American victory in the Revolutionary War and the subsequent 1783 Treaty of Paris, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 was an act passed by Congress that created and organized the territories that lay west of the Appalachian Mountains. This area became known as the Northwest Territory. This territory was an area bounded by Canada to the north, the Ohio River to the south, and the Mississippi River to the west. The Northwest Ordinance was designed to serve as a plan for the development and settlement of this vast territory, which included the modern-day states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. In 1800, the portion of land extending west from the Ohio border to the Mississippi River was carved out of the Northwest Territory to establish the Indiana Territory. As settlers moved west and as Indiana progressed toward statehood, the Indiana Territory was partitioned to create the Michigan Territory in 1805 and the Illinois Territory in 1809. In 1816, Indiana was admitted to the Union as the 19th state, and the United States Congress donated 4 sections of federal land to establish a permanent seat of government for the new state. 2 years later, in 1818, under the Treaty of St. Mary's, the Lenape Delaware peoples relinquished title to their tribal lands in central Indiana and agreed to leave the area completely by 1821, in exchange for money and a large portion of land to settle on west of the Mississippi River. In an effort to encourage the settlement of Indiana, the federal government sold land at a discounted rate to interested settlers moving west. This opportunity lured many settlers to the area, including Irish and German immigrants. The area began to establish itself and grew rapidly. Before Indiana's admission as a state, Corydon, Indiana, a town in southern Indiana near the Ohio River, had served as the governing seat for the territory since it was close to transportation and far away from Native American threats on Indiana's frontier. However, in 1820, after Indiana was admitted into the Union and following the Treaty of St. Mary's, the Indiana General Assembly authorized a committee of 10 commissioners to select a site in central Indiana for the new state capital. The state legislature appointed Alexander Ralston and Elias Pym Fordham to survey and design a town plan. Ralston had been a surveyor for Pierre L'Enfant and assisted him in laying out the street and city plans for Washington, D.C. In 1825, the state capital was officially relocated from Corydon, Indiana to Indianapolis. Ralston's original plan called for a 1 square mile town with a large circular commons in its center and 4 main avenues radiating outwards from it in northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest directions. Originally, the governor's mansion was located in the center of the circular commons, but due to lack of privacy, no governor wanted to live there, and this space later became occupied by the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. The Capitol building lay to the circle's west and a courthouse to its east. Ralston's plan also accounted for numerous parks and public squares along the city's main avenues. Once the town was fully laid out, the land was divided into lots and sold, the proceeds of which would go on to fund public buildings including the State House, the courthouse, the state clerk's office, and offices for the governor and state treasurer. In 1822, a militia was organized for central Indiana, and a couple of years later the city formed its own rifle and artillery companies. From the 1820s to 1850s, Indianapolis formed some of the country's first municipally organized police and fire departments. In its early years, due to the city's low-lying areas that lay near the White River and Fall Creek, the city suffered many catastrophic floods, including a flood that killed 25 local residents in 1821. Poor drainage and sanitation in Indy's early years contributed to the spread of illnesses and diseases. Mosquitoes were numerous and spread malaria. Influenza, cholera, and smallpox all hit the city hard in the 1820s and 30s. To combat the spread of these illnesses, the first cemetery was established next to the White River in 1821. Afterwards, the Indiana Central Medical Society formed in 1823 to train physicians. A city board of health was appointed in 1831, and the Indiana Central Medical College organized in 1848. City Hospital was completed in 1859, but would not be occupied until it was used during the American Civil War, where it served as a military hospital. Indianapolis was founded on the White River under the incorrect assumption that the river could serve as a major transportation artery. But in reality, the river was too shallow during most of the year for steamboats to use. After the steamboat Robert Hanna ran aground in 1831, no steamboat dared venture up the White River again to conduct its business. However, flatboats and keelboats continued to use the river, and horse-drawn barges continued to transport goods into the heart of the city using canals. In 1836, the Indiana General Assembly passed the Mammoth Improvement Act to greatly expand the state's infrastructure, funding turnpikes, canals, and railroads. The act brought the promise of canal transportation to the city. However, only a year after the act was passed, the Panic of 1837 brought a screeching halt to the project and ended with the state government declaring bankruptcy in 1839. Work had begun on Indy's canal system, but a total of only 7 miles of the Central Canal were completed before money ran out. This 7-mile stretch connected Indy to the village of Broad Ripple to its north, and these canals can still be seen today. Road construction proved more effective and less expensive than building canals. The city lies on the path of the National Road, which was the first major improvement highway in the United States. Built between 1811 and 1837, this 620-mile road runs in an east-west direction, connecting Cumberland, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois, just outside St. Louis, Missouri. The Michigan Road, a state-funded project and Indiana's first superhighway, was constructed in the 1830s and 40s and connected Madison, Indiana on the Ohio River to Michigan City on Lake Michigan. The road passed through the heart of Indianapolis. Similar major state roads constructed during the 1820s would connect Indy to Fort Wayne, Crawfordsville, and Lafayette, Indiana. And in 1838, stagecoach service began between Indianapolis and Cincinnati and Columbus, Ohio. Perhaps most important of all, the construction of railroads led to Indy's massive growth in the mid-19th century. In 1847, the first steam railroad in Indiana, the Madison and Indianapolis, arrived in the city. By 1858, major rail lines served the city, and in 1853, the first Union Railroad depot in the United States opened its doors in the city. The city's position as a railroad hub boosted commercial trade, increased property values, and encouraged further development. Another important thing the railroads provided for the area was a way for local farmers and local manufacturers to export their crops and wares to markets outside Indy. In the city's early days, most of the local markets and businesses set up shop along Washington Street, establishing what would later be known as Indianapolis City Market. Naturally, banks, lenders, and insurance companies followed, and boards of agriculture set up shop in the district as well, creating a business nucleus in the city and cementing Indianapolis as the financial hub of the state. In 1853, several blocks around the city market district and along Washington Street became the first part of the city illuminated with gaslight street lamps. Before the arrival of the railroad, only grist mills, used by locals to grind grain into flour, dotted the banks of the White River. However, after the arrival of the railroad, local residents began to expand the city's manufacturing capabilities. Steam mills, sawmills, wool carding factories, beef and pork packing plants, and breweries sprung up around the city. The Indianapolis foundry began its operations in 1833. Iron manufacturing expanded, and a new brass foundry and coppersmith began operating in the mid-1850s. Indy's first gas works was completed in 1851, supplying city residents with natural gas for lighting. And it was in 1852 that the first Indiana State Fair was held on grounds that became known as Military Park, just west of downtown. Free public school arrived in the city in the 1840s, although private school existed in the city beforehand. These private schools were often run by religious organizations, the largest religious groups early in the city's history being Baptists, Presbyterians, and Methodists. However, local residents voted to approve a tax increase to support funding public schools, but the Indiana Supreme Court declared the tax unconstitutional in 1857. Public free schools did not return to the city until 1861, but private and state-funded institutions continued to flourish during this period. And a multitude of newspapers began circulation in the city in the 1820s, including the Indianapolis Gazette and the Indianapolis Journal. The Indiana Freeman, an anti-slavery newspaper, began publishing in 1844, and a few local newspapers, such as Das Indiana Volksblatt, published in German to serve the city's large German immigrant population. During the American Civil War, Indianapolis remained loyal to the Union. On April 16, 1861, the first orders were issued to form Indiana military regiments, and Indianapolis was made the rallying place in the state for the gathering Union soldiers. Within a week of the order, more than 12,000 new recruits from Indiana signed up to fight. 24 military camps were established around Indianapolis, including Camp Sullivan, Burnside, Fremont, Carrington, and Morton. Camp Morton also served as a major prisoner of war camp for captured Confederate soldiers. The state of Indiana mustered hundreds of regiments for the war, and over 60% of them organized and trained in Indianapolis. Indiana raised ethnic units, including the 32nd Regiment, a German-American regiment, the 28th Colored Troops, a regiment of black soldiers trained at Camp Fremont, and the 35th Regiment, an Irish-American regiment. The city of Indianapolis itself helped raise the 132nd Regiment and the 11th Regiment. The 11th Regiment was composed of Indianapolis's 4 militia units, the National Guards, City Greys, the Indianapolis Independent Zouaves, and the Zouave Guards. During the Civil War years, the city population of Indy tripled from 18,000 in 1860 to over 45,000 by the end of 1864. This was due in large part to the arrival of new businesses and industries setting up shop in the city to support the war effort. Some examples of such businesses include the founding of the Van Camp Packing Company, a local canning business, and the establishment of King & Brothers Meatpacking Company. Other notable events during the Civil War included President-elect Abraham Lincoln stopping in the city in 1861 on his way to Washington, D.C. for his presidential inauguration. Also, Richard Jordan Gatling developed and tested his famous Gatling gun in 1861 while living in Indy, and a few years later went on to found the Gatling Gun Company. The Civil War officially ended on April 9, 1865, and President Abraham Lincoln was tragically assassinated only days later on April 15th. While Lincoln's body was being transported by train to Springfield, Illinois, the train stopped in Indianapolis, where an estimated crowd of 100,000 locals came to pay their respect to the president at the Indiana State House. The city experienced an incredible post-war boom following the end of hostilities in the American Civil War. By the turn of the century, Indy's population would surpass 170,000 people. This population surge created a building boom, and urban development expanded in all directions. Many of the city's most iconic architecture was built during this period, including the Indiana State House, Union Station, Das Deutsche Haus, and the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, perhaps the most iconic symbol of Indianapolis. It was during this period that distinct neighborhoods began to form in the city as well. By 1870, over one-third of all the city's African Americans lived in and around Indiana Avenue on the city's northwest side. This area grew in large part due to the great migration of African Americans from the rural South to the industrial North following the Civil War. Many African American owned businesses opened in this area, including Samuel G. Smothers' grocery store and William Franklin's peddler shop. A great jazz scene later flourished around Indiana Avenue in the 1920s, producing such jazz greats as Slide Hampton, Freddie Hubbard, and Wes Montgomery, one of the most influential jazz guitarists of all time, and who is credited with popularizing the Naptown sound, a distinct type of jazz that emerged from Indianapolis. In the 1870s, America entered an industrial boom. Cities such as Chicago, Cincinnati, Detroit, and St. Louis grew immensely, and Indianapolis served as a central railroad nexus that connected them all. During this period, Indy experienced a local gas boom, a stockyard expansion, and railroad traffic transformed the city into a manufacturing powerhouse. Between 1880 and 1900, the number of industrial manufacturers in the city increased from 688 to over 1,190, and the value of manufactured goods tripled. Meatpacking and vegetable canning operations flourished. All of these new employment opportunities meant a huge demand for labor. Indiana residents from the state's rural areas, African Americans from the South, and immigrants from Ireland, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Greece, and the Balkans poured into the city to fill these labor needs. To entertain the city's growing population, minstrel shows, burlesque shows, variety shows, circuses, operettas, concerts, and plays were held, and beer gardens and saloons opened around the city. A small red light district flourished close to Union Station, and large theaters such as English's Opera House hosted large stage productions. Sadly, this beautiful opera house was demolished in 1949. In 1873, Indy's first public library opened in a room at the city's public high school. A few years later, in 1875, Northwestern Christian University moved to a new 25-acre campus in the community of Irvington on Indy's east side, and 2 years later, in 1877, changed its name to Butler University. The late 1800s saw the beginning of the Indianapolis Park and Boulevard system. This city beautification project built a network of tree-lined streets that linked together city parks and improved outdoor gathering spots. In 1876, the city government took control of Governor's Circle, which is later renamed Monument Circle, and added landscaping to the vacant University Square and its military grounds to establish University Park. Also in 1876, Eli Lilly and Company was founded by Colonel Eli Lilly, a pharmaceutical chemist and Union Army veteran of the American Civil War. Eli Lilly would later become the first pharmaceutical company to mass-produce insulin and the polio vaccine, and now manufactures well-known products such as Prozac, Cialis, Methadone, and Trulicity. Today, the company is the most valuable drug company in the world, with over $842 billion in market capitalization, and is the city's largest private employer with a workforce of over 11,000. In 1886, there was discovery of a huge natural gas and oil deposit near Indianapolis, the Trenton Gas Field, which at the time was the largest known natural gas and oil field in the entire world. This period of time, which lasted until roughly 1920, was known as the Indiana Gas Boom. Indiana offered a free supply of natural gas to any factories that would operate in the state, which attracted numerous glass manufacturers and automobile factories to the area. The 1880s and 90s are considered by many to be the city's golden era, when the city had grown from a small farming town into a prominent industrial city in the Midwest, a railroad hub, food processing center, and industrial powerhouse. At this point in time, Indianapolis was the nation's third largest pork packing center and the nation's second largest railroad center. This period perhaps reached its zenith when Indianapolis resident Benjamin Harrison was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1881 and became the 23rd President of the United States in 1888. Benjamin Harrison was a member of the Harrison family of Virginia, being a great-grandson of founding father and governor of Virginia, Benjamin Harrison V, and the grandson of the 9th U.S. President, William Henry Harrison. Although not born in Indianapolis, Benjamin Harrison moved with his family to the city from the Cincinnati area in 1854 after attaining his law degree. He began practicing law in the area shortly thereafter and was even elected as a city attorney in 1857. It was during this time period that Harrison became involved in local Republican Party politics. Harrison took a break from practicing law to join the Union Army as an officer during the American Civil War and fought bravely on the front lines of General Sherman's Atlanta campaign. After the war, Harrison lost a bid for governor of Indiana, but was nominated to run for U.S. Senate. Harrison served as U.S. Senator for the state of Indiana from 1881 to 1887, and in 1888, Harrison defeated Grover Cleveland in the U.S. presidential election. Harrison's presidency was marked by aggressive foreign policy, and many historians credit the Harrison presidency for shaping foundational antitrust legislation, reforming the civil service, and modernizing the U.S. Navy. After his presidency, Harrison lived the remainder of his life in Indianapolis, and his remains can be found there today at the Crown Hill Cemetery. Indianapolis entered the 20th century firing on all cylinders. The Soldiers and Sailors Monument was publicly dedicated on May 15, 1902, in front of a crowd of thousands. Veterans from the Mexican-American War, Civil War, and Spanish-American War were in attendance, as well as Governor Winfield T. Durbin and former U.S. Secretary of State John W. Foster. Poems were read and musicians played all day long. The festivities began at 8 a.m. and were concluded with a large evening fireworks display. Along with railroads, the success of Indianapolis will always be tied to the automobile. In the early 20th century, Indy hosted automobile manufacturing companies such as Duesenberg, Marmon, National, and Stutz, and at one point rivaled Detroit as a center of automobile manufacturing. As a result, the city also played host to large automobile part plants such as Allison Transmission, which began operating in 1915. The growth in trucking as a means to transport goods meant that Indianapolis would continue to play a major role in logistics, as Indy was located centrally between Chicago, Louisville, Cincinnati, Columbus, St. Louis, and Detroit, leading the state and city to be known as the Crossroads of America. The automobile also allowed Indy residents to expand outwards to live in the suburbs and drive themselves into the city to work each day. Lastly, spectators the world over gathered to watch the auto races taking place at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, with Ray Haroon winning the first ever Indy 500 on May 30th, 1911, in his Marmon Wasp race car. During the early 20th century, Indianapolis was also the headquarters of the inspirational and tireless Madam C.J. Walker, the first female self-made millionaire in U.S. history. Born Sarah Breedlove in Louisiana, Madam Walker was the first person in her family to be born free, as her parents and older siblings were born slaves and worked on a plantation until the Emancipation Proclamation. Walker lost both her parents by age 7, so she set out on her own at a very young age, living with relatives and working in various industries. At one point, Walker lived with her brothers in St. Louis, who were both barbers. It was during this time period that Walker began losing some of her own hair due to stress, genetics, and from using the harsh hair products in fashion at the time. Walker experimented with different hair products, cosmetics, and techniques until she found ones that were helpful to her. She later sold her products under the name Madam C.J. Walker, which she adopted after her third marriage. Madam Walker's hair products and cosmetics proved very popular and immediately took off. Walker traveled the United States, Central America, and Latin America advertising her products. She also opened training programs across the United States dubbed the Walker System, which were used to instruct her national network of licensed sales agents, who each earned sizable commissions. In 1910, Madam Walker moved her headquarters to Indianapolis, where she also built a factory, hair salon, research laboratory, and beauty school to train her sales agents. She would ultimately employ over 40,000 African American men and women across the United States. Miss Walker owned houses in upstate New York, Harlem, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. In her later years, while her daughter ran the business, Madam Walker became a philanthropist and donated large sums of money to organizations such as the YMCA and the NAACP, amongst others, and created scholarships for African American students. Madam Walker's story inspired African Americans across the nation who were striving to improve their lives and become financially independent. Walker's incredible account of success in the face of such adversity went overlooked for many years. but has recently been brought into the public sphere through books and television shows. Like Madam Walker, Indianapolis has had to overcome adversity as well. One such event took place on Halloween night in 1913, when workers from the Indianapolis Traction and Terminal Company, a company responsible for public transportation within the city, went on strike and attempted to unionize in an effort to improve their working conditions. The company responded by suppressing the initial unionization efforts and rejecting an offer of mediation put forth by the United States Department of Labor. This escalated tensions. Consequently, on November 2nd, a riot broke out in the city, which involved over 8,000 people and lasted 4 days. Over 100 people were injured, and 6 people died. The city police tried to quell the riots, but they refused to use deadly force against the rioters. Governor Samuel Ralston eventually called for the Indiana National Guard to step in, which they did, and put the city under martial law. On November 6th, angry rioters surrounded the Indiana State House, listing their grievances and demanding the military leave the city. Governor Ralston addressed the crowd and promised concessions if the workers returned to work. Governor Ralston is credited with bringing an end to the rioting, and after 3 peaceful days, the National Guard left the city. Later that month, the Indiana General Assembly met and enacted Indiana's first minimum wage laws, regular working hours, workplace safety requirements, and working days off. Kurt Vonnegut, likely Indianapolis's most famous author, led an incredibly interesting life and left a lasting impact on the city. Vonnegut was born in 1922. His great-grandfather immigrated from Germany to the Indianapolis area in the mid-1800s and set up a hardware store. Vonnegut's grandfather and father were both celebrated architects and designed many of Indianapolis's iconic buildings, including Das Deutsche Haus and the Fletcher Trust Building. Vonnegut's mother, Edith, hailed from a wealthy family of local brewers. His brother Bernard studied at MIT, and while later working at General Electric, discovered that silver iodide could be used as a nucleating agent to seed clouds, that is, to make clouds produce rain. During the 1920s and 1930s, the once wealthy Vonnegut family fell on hard times. Because Prohibition had passed, the family brewing business faltered, and due to the Great Depression, no new buildings were being built, thus no architects were needed. Following the American entry into World War II, at the age of 20, Kurt Vonnegut enlisted in the Army where he received training in artillery and scouting. While on leave in May of 1944, Vonnegut returned home for Mother's Day weekend to discover his mother Edith had committed suicide by overdosing on sleeping pills. Many believe Edith could not come to terms with losing the wealth and social status she once enjoyed. A few months later in 1944, Vonnegut was sent to the front lines of Europe, and in December, while fighting in the Battle of the Bulge, he was captured by the German army with around 50 other U.S. soldiers. While being transported to a prisoner of war camp at Dresden, Germany, the train carrying the Allied prisoners was mistakenly attacked by fighter aircraft from the Royal Air Force, which killed roughly 150 train passengers. Vonnegut survived the train journey to the prisoner of war camp at Dresden. However, he was imprisoned and working in the city when it was infamously firebombed between February 13th and 15th, 1945. Vonnegut survived the firebombings by hiding inside a meat locker 3 stories underground until the bombing ceased. Afterward, he was ordered to excavate bodies from the city's rubble with other prisoners of war. Vonnegut survived the war and returned to the United States in 1945. But these harrowing life experiences which he survived greatly affected him for the rest of his life, and shaped the anti-war writings for which he later became celebrated for. Indianapolis grew immensely following the post-war boom. By 1960, the city's population reached over 475,000 people. It was in 1968, following the shocking assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, that then presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy broke the news of Dr. King's murder to a crowd gathered in Indianapolis and delivered an impromptu speech. This impromptu speech, given at arguably the height of racial tensions in the United States, is often regarded as one of the finest speeches about racial reconciliation in U.S. history. The listener can hear the crowd gasp and scream as the news of Dr. King's death is delivered, but only moments later, the listener can feel the fear and tension of the crowd subsiding as Kennedy calmly and thoughtfully delivers his speech. Kennedy asked the gathered crowd what kind of country they wished to live in, and what direction they want America to move in. He tells the crowd that Americans can either let hatred consume them and respond with more violence, or they can respond with love and understanding, as Dr. King would. That Kennedy himself can relate firsthand to feeling hate and wanting retribution, as he had recently lost his brother to an assassin, the first time he publicly spoke about the tragedy. But, Kennedy continued, violence only creates more violence. The vast majority of Americans, both white and black, want to live together in harmony. And if living together in harmony is the direction most people want America to move towards, then we should not let the actions of a few wrongdoers prevent us from realizing that future. Riots broke out in cities all across the United States that night, but not in Indianapolis. In 1970, under the leadership of Mayor Richard Lugar, the city of Indianapolis and Marion County consolidated into what would be known as Unigov. Unigov removed government redundancies and increased tax revenues from the growing suburbs. This consolidation essentially added 300 square miles and over 250,000 people overnight to the city's books. During his term, Mayor Lugar is also credited with revitalizing downtown by overseeing the construction or renovation of several major projects, including the renovation of the Indianapolis City Market and building Market Square Arena, where the Pacers played until 1999 and where Elvis Presley's last concert was held in 1977. During the late 70s and 80s, the city pursued an aggressive economic development strategy known as the Indianapolis Project, in an effort to raise the city's stature as a sports tourism destination. The project attracted the 1982 U.S. Olympic Festival, the 1987 Pan American Games, and attracted the Baltimore Colts to relocate to Indianapolis in 1984. The 1980s also saw construction begin on White River State Park. That construction continues today and will continue into the foreseeable future as more things are added. This urban park in downtown Indianapolis hugs the White River and boasts numerous attractions including the Indianapolis Zoo, the Idle-Jorg Museum of American Indians and Western Art, the Indiana State Museum, the NCAA Hall of Champions, Military Park, the Everwise Amphitheater, the McCormick Cabin Site, the White River Gardens, the Medal of Honor Memorial, and Victory Baseball Field, where the Indianapolis Indians play. All of these sites are connected by walking and biking trails and are meticulously landscaped. Together, the White River State Park and Canal make up one of 7 distinguished cultural districts in the city. The other 6 cultural districts in the city being Broad Ripple Village, Fountain Square, Indiana Avenue, Market East, Massachusetts Avenue, and the Wholesale District. 6 of these districts are connected by the 8.1-mile Indianapolis Cultural Trail, a shared-use path and linear park in the city's core. The 7th district, Broad Ripple Village, is connected to the others via the Monon Trail. A few notable events in the city's history have also occurred more recently in the 21st century. In 2001, Indianapolis became the first city in the United States to authorize charter schools, which are publicly funded schools that operate independently from school districts. There are currently 62 such charter schools operating within the city today. In 2007, the Colts won their first Super Bowl since moving to Indianapolis, which many credit with revitalizing the downtown area. And last, but certainly not least, in 2008, 2 of the largest projects in city history were completed: the new terminal at Indianapolis International Airport and Lucas Oil Stadium. Lucas Oil Stadium hosted Super Bowl 46 in 2012, where Eli Manning and the Giants defeated Tom Brady's Patriots for a second time in 4 years. So what does the future hold for Indianapolis? Well, the city's future looks bright. Data indicates that the population and economy of Indianapolis will continue to grow at a healthy pace in the near future. Since the 1980 census, Indianapolis has consistently grown in population. From the 2010 to 2020 census, the city experienced an 8.2% growth of its population, meaning over 67,000 new people moved to the area during that time period. It also appears that the city has successfully transitioned away from being dominated by manufacturing and is seeing rapid growth in the logistics, administrative, biosciences, and tourism sectors. Over the past several years, the city experienced lower unemployment rates than the national average, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics forecasts consistent economic growth for the region. According to the Indianapolis Star, there is over $5 billion currently in the city's downtown development pipeline. Some notable projects in the development pipeline include construction of the new IU Health Hospital campus, a convention center expansion, construction of several large hotels, and the redevelopment of the Circle Center Mall and City Market into mixed-use spaces. The city is also currently bidding to be the next expansion team for Major League Soccer. Indianapolis. It's a tale of resilience and evolution. The city has overcome many obstacles in its past, ranging from slow economic growth in its early history to dealing with social and economic upheavals along the way. Today, it has emerged as perhaps an unlikely candidate to become one of America's largest cities and a leader of the Midwest in population, culture, and economy. The city has something unique to offer everyone, but don't take my word for it. Go see it for yourself. Until next time, and thank you for stopping by and listening to the story of Indianapolis, a great American city.